Welcome to Kinky Knots Cafe's Proactive is the Way. Proactive is the Way is a podcast brought to you by two sisters who dove into the health and wellness industry. One plan and the other by fate. We have joined forces to bring to you authentic conversations about our personal experiences as it relates to managing our health, working within the industry, and taking our combined knowledge to share with you some pearls of wisdom that you can take with you to live the best version of you. Over the next year, we will host 2 episodes a month. Each month, we will focus on a topic that is designed to increase an awareness of tools and resources to enhance an aspect of your mind, body, and spirit. A couple of weeks ago, Tiffany and I shared how we tend to listen for the voice of our vocation and where we went wrong on our journey in creating a life fully designed by us. During our discussions, one of the issues that we found occurred as a result of ineffectively listening for the voice of our vocation. We fell into the trap of taking on an identity that was not our own. How often have you seen individuals attempting to be someone in which they were never designed to become? Primarily done because they leveraged their gifts of foresight inappropriately, or pursued a path because they felt pressured by their community. So, how do we overcome our tendencies to desire and pursue that which was not designed for us? How do we politely ignore or drown out the noise of those who believe they are acting in good faith, possessing good intentions and guiding us, and make headway towards that in which our heart truly desires? Well, listen up to our next author who is quite brilliant. A hidden gem, if you ask me. What is the old adage? Never judge a book by its cover. Well, when I first ran into this book, I dug the title. I wasn't too sure of how this author would speak to me, or rather, if I would find his message enlightening. I was quite surprised when I dug in and realized how well he nurtured my mind and soul with his beautifully written correlations and analogies wrapped into his well structured and highly relevant storytelling. A breath of fresh air, indeed. Today, I will interview the author, so to speak. We will address some of the questions I posed a couple of weeks ago, and as he quoted within his book in scripture, John chapter 1, verse 14. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. We will dive into his book and let his words grace us with his presence. Disclaimer: however well intentioned, books are not recipes. Because our lives depend on the ability to control what happens in consciousness moment by moment, each person has to achieve success on the basis of his or her own individual efforts and creativity. What a book can do is serve as the framework of a theory for you to reflect upon and from which you may then draw your own conclusions. So join me today as we discuss Let Your Life Speak, listening for the voice of vocation. I will begin with a quote that really encapsulates our discussions today. If you are here unfaithfully with us, you are causing terrible damage. This quote is by Rumi. The author further explains this quote by sharing that if we are unfaithful to true self, we will extract a price from others. We will make promises we cannot keep, build houses from flimsy stuff, conjure dreams that devolve into nightmares, and other people will suffer if we are unfaithful to true self. All right, so let's kick things off with addressing my first question. During our last podcast, I asked Tiffany if she ever found herself living someone else's life. Well, in Parker's book, he began with how he had created a life that mimicked his greatest heroes: Mahatma Gandhi, MLK, Rosa Parks, and the likes. He shared that he devised the loftiest ideals he could find that tended to be unreal, a distortion of his true self, living his life from the outside in versus the inside out. He shared that he had simply found a noble way to live a life that was not his own, a life spent imitating heroes instead of listening to his heart. In our next question, Tiffany and I shared what we thought it meant to listen for the voice of vocation. Parker shared, listening for the voice of vocation means that before you tell your life what you intend to do with it, listening for what it intends to do with you. Before you tell your life what truths and values you have decided to live up to, let your life tell you what truths you embody, what values you represent. Tiffany, Tiffany and I actually spoke about this when we discussed our last book, Flow, and the importance of permitting life to ensue you rather than you pursuing it. Tiffany shared that happiness, or the path to happiness, occurred when forces greater than her led her from pursuing a career as a doctor to putting forth all of her energy into becoming a nurse practitioner. She indicated that she was guided on a path that was more aligned to her abilities and desires to be more involved and closer to her patients. As a result of life ensuing her, she found a role in which she possessed greater dedication. This allowed her to prepare and cultivate an experience in which she was able to control. As a result, she acquired a better quality of life, and thus leading to her success and overall happiness. So, Parker shares that it is so important that we listen to our true self. As our true self, when violated, will resist us, sometimes at great cost, holding our lives in check until we honor its truth. Vocation does not come from willfulness, it comes from listening. I must listen to my life and try to understand what it is truly about, not what we would like it to be about. Otherwise, our life, will never represent anything real in the world, no matter how earnest our intentions. Vocation does not mean a goal that I pursue, it means a calling that I hear. Before I can tell my life what I want to do with it, I must listen to my life telling the who I am. I must listen for the truth and values at the heart of my own identity, not the standards by which I must live, but the standards by which I cannot help but live if I am living my own life. The author goes on to share that this can be quite difficult to do because from our first days in school, we are taught to listen to everything and everyone but ourselves, to take all of our clues about living from the people and powers around us. We listen for guidance everywhere except from within. If we can learn to read our own responses to our own experience, we will receive the guidance we need to live more authentic lives. To live authentically, to truly let our life speak, we must not only listen to things we want to hear or what we would share with others, we must also let it speak things that we do not want to hear and would never tell anyone else. Our life is not only about our strengths and virtues, it is also about our abilities and our limits, our trespasses and our shadow. We must embrace what we dislike or find shameful about ourselves, as well as what we are confident and proud of. And our last question of our last episode, I shared with Tiffany that it was inevitable that while pursuing your greatest desire, there will be roadblocks. I posed the question: how does one maintain focus to keep moving forward and muffle or drown out the noise? In Let Your Life Speak, Parker talks about starting his career in ministry only to cease those efforts and pursue a PhD in sociology. After which, he devoted his life to teaching at Georgetown and giving back to his community, only to get burned out. Then, for the next 10 years, he took a sabbatical and communed with the Quakers. And it was during this time his family and those closest to him verbally shared that he was squandering his gifts. Parker shared a poignant story of when he fell into a deep depression, where he was admitted into the hospital and on mood altering drugs. He called it his journey into darkness, a self inflicted affliction as a result of not listening to his true self, his voice of vocation. It was during these moments he actually found his true self. And what I love most about how he overcame this setback was how he permitted himself to view his depression differently. Initially, he shared, this turn in my life was not the sort of spiritual journey I had hoped someday to take. Not an upward climb into the realms of light, not a mountaintop experience of God's presence. In fact, mine was a journey in the opposite direction, to an inner circle of hell and a face to face encounter with the monsters who live there. It was only during one of his sessions with his therapist that his views changed. After hours of careful listening, my therapist offered an image that helped me eventually reclaim my life. He said, you seem to look upon depression as the hand of an enemy trying to crush you. Do you think you could see it instead as the hand of a friend, pressing you down to the ground on which it is safe to stand? Wow. Folks, my mind was blown. This approach was unprecedented. So often we look at depression negatively. Parker finally realized that depression was indeed the hand of a friend trying to press him down to the ground on which it was safe to stand. As he explains, the ground of my own truth, my own nature, with its complex mix of limits and gifts, liabilities and assets, darkness and lights. Eventually, I developed my own image of the befriending impulse behind my depression. Imagine that from early in my life, a friendly figure standing a block away was trying to get my attention by shouting my name, wanting to teach me some hard but healing truths about myself, but fearful of what I might hear or arrogantly trying to live without help, or simply too busy with my ideas and ego and ethics to bother. I ignored the shouts and walked away. So this figure, still with friendly intent, came closer and shouted more loudly. But I kept walking. Ever closer it came, close enough to tap me on the shoulder, but I walked on. Frustrated by my unresponsiveness, the figure threw stones at my back, then struck me with a stick, still wanting simply to get my attention. But despite the pain, I kept walking away. Over the years, the befriending intent of this figure never disappeared, but became obscured by the frustration caused by my refusal to turn around. Since shouts and taps, stones and sticks had failed to do the trick, there was only one thing left: drop the nuclear bomb called depression on me. Not with the intent to kill, but as a last ditch effort to get me to turn and ask the simple question: what do you want? When I was finally able to make that turn and start to absorb and act on the self knowledge that then became available to me, I began to get well. This journey for Parker was actually more of a pilgrimage. Those hardships were not seen as accidental, but as integral to the journey itself. This journey stripped his ego of the illusion that it was in charge and made space for his true self to emerge. Amazing. Folks, we just explored on the surface some of the pearls of wisdom dropped in this book. If you have not already done so, I strongly encourage you to get the book and read the book. It's a quick read and worth your time. I will close with this. The world needs people with the patience and the passion to make that pilgrimage to find their true self, not only for their own sake, but also as a social and political act. The world still waits for the truth that will set us free. My truth, your truth, our truth. The truth that was seated in the earth when each of us arrived here, formed in the image of God. Cultivating that truth is the authentic vocation of every human being. Live in truth and the light. All right, all right. Join us in 2 weeks as we prepare for our next series on emotional intelligence. We look forward to you joining us. And in preparation for our discussions, we have included in the description where you can pick up a copy of our featured book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Travis Bradberry. This is going to be enlightening beyond measure. Even the Dalai Lama shared how this book does a phenomenal job of succinctly explaining how we can deal with emotions creatively and employ our intelligence in a beneficial way. To access all replays or learn more about Kinky Knots Cafe's Proactive is the Way, please visit www.kinkyknotscafe.com. Proactive is the way, my friends. Take good care.